for coming. I want to thank everyone for coming. My name is Richard, and we are about to get started on our 20 years after Charles Bukowski Memorial Reading. I'm very happy everyone is here. I first of all would like to thank Johnny Valenti. Johnny is one of the owners, and Johnny has done a great job with the sound check, and he's done a great job of opening the bar up to this event. So I want to thank you. As I look at a painting of John Fante, I'm happy to say that plans on the cellar are moving along, Johnny?
Yes.
The cellar, quickly. So the cellar, made famous in the John Fante novel Ask the Dust, where Arturo Bendini blows his first royalty check on a B-girl. The cellar is going to be reopened at some point in the next year or so. We're very excited. I would really thank you so much for coming. Secondly, I would like to thank all the poets. We have 5 poets tonight. We have Joan Jobe Smith, who will be starting us off. We have her husband Fred Voss, Dan Fante, John Fante's son, I just mentioned. Essay Griffin is some essays around. There's Essay. You're coming, you're up the end, so you're fine. And then Suzanne Lummis will bring us home. Where is Suzanne? Suzanne is Charles Fletcher Lummis's granddaughter. No, a non-trivial statement. The old man of Los Angeles, Charles Fletcher Lummis. So I want to thank everyone for coming. We're going to get started in just a second. It's a little bit after 6. We hope this will take about an hour and 15 minutes to get through the 5 poets, but I don't think we're not going to tell anyone to stop talking in the middle of a poem. So just some basic logistics. I think we ran out of flyers about 20 minutes ago, but this is an event put on by the Los Angeles Visionaries Association. We have some flyers. If you want to get on the mailing list, please find me. I'll get you a flyer. Get on the mailing list to keep up with events like this. Obviously, no one needs to be on the mailing list for this event because we were so popular, but we do a lot of great events. So please sign up for that, and we hope you can join us. Suzanne is going to be doing a free lava salon in April about poem noir, and that will be April 27th, and because April is National Poetry Month, because April is the coolest month, as TSLA tells us. So we at Lava really believe in Los Angeles and poetry. I have a Charles Bukowski bus tour coming up at the end of this month, the 29th. That starts in the Arts District. It's a lot of fun. Terminal Annex, East 5th Street, East Hollywood, Pink Elephant Liquor, Westlake. It's a lot of fun. Again, I just want to thank everyone, and I think that's it. We're going to get started. So I will take a breath. Joan, are you ready? Do you have some water? Okay, great. So I would like to introduce Joan Jobe Smith. I don't want to introduce her too much. Joan, you have lived the life. You've really done wonderful things in Los Angeles. You were a good friend of Charles Bukowski. Why don't you start by telling us about your most recent published work? And I think that will be just a great introduction, and then you can just jump into the deep end. Perfect. I think you're perfect. Thank you.
Well, Richard, you make me sound like I found a cure for cancer or something. Thank you so much. All I was a tawdry go-go girl in the 60s and 70s, and then I happened to meet Charles Bukowski when I went back to Cal State Long Beach in 72 to clean up my act and hopefully get a teaching job, hoping they didn't find out I had been a go-go girl. So this is my Bukowski hagiography that I just published via Silverbird. So it's mostly meanderings of me talking about all the times I went to see Bukowski read.
Will you tell us about the feminist walkout?
Oh yeah, he really likes this. Back in the 70s, I went to just about every poetry reading he gave in Southern California back then. I attended about 14 of them. And they were really wonderful. And the feminists absolutely hated him back then. The feminists that were my age and a little older, they were out fighting for our rights and equal pay. And here's Bukowski writing these poems about. And the one that they really hated was an excerpt that he would eventually put, I think, in Women, and it was in his book Love Dog from Hell. And I forget the name of the poem, but it's right in the middle of the book if you want to go look for it. but it's a long passage, like a whole page of him enjoying oral sex from a female, and great graphic depiction what it feels like from the male point of view to have this lovely thing happen to him. And it can be kind of hard on a woman to read this, and I don't mean hard in a good way. I mean it's kind of unpleasant if you're a woman and you're not used to this kind of stuff. And anyway, the feminists, I don't know if they expected him to read this poem, but he did read other things that offended them as well. And they'd always sit in the front row, and when he'd get into a raunchy mode, they'd start heckling him, and he'd get raunchier, and they would en masse get up and walk out. And there would be about 50 of them walk down the aisles. And they did this in about 3 readings I went to, and they would heckle him, and one time they said, "Bukowski, why don't you ever write about your mother?" And he said, "My mother died before I was born." And he'd always have some great comeback. There probably wasn't anyone in Vegas that could come back like Bukowski could. He was very verbal. As you know, you've read thousands of words of his. If you're fans, and I presume you all are, to come here tonight. Because, and then also I was good friends with Bukowski's women. I loved his women. They were my friends. Fran Tsai, Linda King, and Cupcakes, Pamela, Cupcakes.
The one he dedicated "Hold My Heart in My Hand" to?
That was Ann Minnebroker. Right. And Linda King, let's see, and I don't know Linda Bukowski very well, but I'm sure she'd let me, I'd be her friend too. Because I loved his women, and one reason I loved Bukowski is how much he wrote about women. Irregardless of what the feminists said, that there's hardly any day of Bukowski's life that he didn't write 1 or 2 poems about women. He loved us, and no matter what he did with us, screaming from the balcony with them, or rolling around down, whatever he did, I wasn't there, I was only a friend. So this is my book. I was the confidant of his friend, his girlfriend Linda King, who would call me and badmouth him, and then he'd call me and tell me the truth. And I had enjoyed about 10 years worth of off and on phone calls with Bukowski and letters, and he was my mentor. He got me writing about the go-go stuff, good, bad, and ugly, for what it was worth. And no, I never got a teaching job because Reagan came into power and he got rid of the English departments in the state of California. So that went my dream. But let me get back to telling you about Bukowski. So I get off here in 10 minutes. I've already used up 8.
Can I take your book?
I've used up 8 minutes.
You're fine.
I've used up 8 minutes.
No one wants you to stop, Joan. Just keep going.
8.5 minutes. Okay. If you're, if you've read a lot of Bukowski, you might realize this. Besides the theme of women, how often he writes about death. Death is one of his leitmotifs. I guess it was his raison d'etre to write about death, to fear dying and wait for it. And he waited a long time for it, considering he expected to die when he was probably about 9. He had a fatalistic twist to him. He had a hard childhood, as you know. And here's a quote that I really like. And to think he wrote this quote in 1966 when he was only 46. And I know a lot of you out there are 21. That seems real old. Dying is sometimes not so much going somewhere as it is apologizing for leaving the rest of the bastards behind. Pretty, pretty, pretty death. And, I wanted to have Bukowski say hello to you. That's a cartoon I did of him off of a Joan Ganny photograph that's in my book. And he wrote "Take It Easy" from a letter to me. And I love Bukowski. I like the pictures of Bukowski where he's smiling. I love the smiling Bukowski. He had some beautiful, beautiful smiles. And Fred, my husband, Fred Voss, bought his head, his bronze head. SA owns one too, that Linda King sculpted in 1972, and it sits on my roll-top desk. So I spend a lot of time with Bukowski all day long. So I'm going to read another Bukowski poem, and this is the last poem he wrote. and he sent it to John Martin via fax, and it was the first, or well, for sure it was the last time Bukowski used the fax. I don't know how long he, actually I think this is the first poem he sent to John Martin on the fax. And John Martin was selling copies of the fax, not selling, he was giving them to patrons all through these years, and he just recently released this on Facebook, and I happened to log on that day that it was there, and I ran it off. So I feel really fortunate to having captured this. And, okay, let me read you Bukowski's poem. Oh, forgive me for whom the bell tolls. Oh, forgive me, man who walked on water. Oh, forgive me, little old woman who lived in a shoe. Oh, forgive me, the mountain that roared at midnight. Oh, forgive me, the dumb sounds of night and day and death. Oh, forgive me, the death of the last beautiful panther. Oh, forgive me, all the sunken ships and defeated armies. This is my first fax poem. It's too late. I have been smitten. So this was dated, I think it was dated February 18th, and then he died March 9th, 1994. Today is the 20th anniversary of it, of his death. And here's a poem I wrote on right around March 9th, my grief poem. And here's a picture of Bukowski that's in Epiglottis. This picture was given to me by Ann Minnebroker. He sent it to Ann when he was in, this was shot in New Orleans when he was there working on it. What's the book, Fred, that he did in New Orleans?
Crucifix and a Death.
Yeah, Crucifix and a Death Hand. He was down there living with Lou and Gypsy. Eggs over easy. This is my poem. I was frying eggs over easy when I heard Bukowski had died, and suddenly the yolks came alive. Grew the size of heavyweight golden gloves smashing my spatula and jaw while the kitchen swelled shut around me like a big blackened eye. Bukowski's obit was in a Thursday newspaper, my favorite newspaper of the week, with the food section. The recipes, this week's sickening ones of what to do with peanuts. The supermarket ads, this week St. Pat's Day specials, corned beef for 89 cents a pound, cabbage for $9. Rye, $1.69. He'll never eat again, if he ever did. Or the wine I later drink with my husband, who mourns more than me as he listens to Bukowski live tape and reads over and over the only letter Hank ever wrote him. Hank never knew, was too busy to care, that his life changed ours, that we'd come to know his mojo poetry as well as the backs of our hearts, where mana and mortality are stored. We'd wanted him to live to be 400. After all, he was 200 at age 30. He was supposed to keep telling it like it is forever, be our poet man, nexus and code breaker of nether worlds. But no one dies when you want him or her to. Death seldom in Ides of March or hemlock time, for which you can set your alarm clock as he was quoted in his obit in the LA Times. You carry in one hand a bundle of darkness that accumulates each day. The eggs over easy were the coldest I ever ate, a March 9th wind blowing in through the window, turning them to ice. And I think that should be it. That's 10 minutes, isn't it? Thank you, you guys. And if you buy my book, I give you this nifty, thrifty, free bookmark.
Let's go this way. Joan, don't forget your book. Perfect. Right there. Joan, thank you so much. And your husband, Fred, come on, it's time for you to come up. I'm going to introduce Joan's husband, Fred. Fred Voss. I have a deep and profound admiration for Fred. He's a machinist, and this is a spiritual and career path that was something you talked to Charles Bukowski about. And personally, when I was in college, learning how to temper tool steel in a machine shop was a very important experience for me. So I have a very, very, very warm feelings for Fred. And Fred, I will just introduce you with that and let you take it away. Yeah.
Thank you. So, 20 years ago, I was working in a furniture factory on Normandy and Vermont in Gardena, across from the poker parlors, and kind of place I associate with Bukowski. And it was in the morning. I pull in the gravel parking lot, and before work, I'm sitting in the car. I'm going to read the paper, and there it is on the front page: Charles Bukowski dead. And then about a week later, I expected him, you know, that he would. I heard he was sick, but still, you just don't expect Bukowski to die. And I wrote this about a week later. When I dropped out of graduate school and went through some lost years where I was drinking and, you know, wanting to be dead, and I was reading Bukowski, and like a lot of people, he really helped pull me through. So I wrote this about a week after he was dead. I got in the bathtub with a piece of paper, and this came out, kind of like looking back at my dark days with Bukowski. Elegy for a Giant. First, I discovered Bukowski in the university library, and it was magic. Nights up, smoking cheap cigars and drinking cheap booze, getting gloriously drunk and enlightened with Bukowski all night. Reading everything, the erections, ejaculations, exhibitions, and general tales of ordinary madness. The crucifix in a death hand. All the poetry and prose, and that picture of him hanging onto the boxcar ladder. It was magic, and it changed me, and I was never the same. And though I went to graduate school for a year, I quickly dropped out and found myself filling up a boarding house room and then a dive apartment in Long Beach with the smell of chain smoking and beer drinking and on the edge of suicide survival, working busboy and factory jobs, and knowing it was worth it, knowing it was right, as I read, burning in water, drowning in flame. And the days run away like wild horses over the hills. And something he'd given me made me burn inside as I suffered and made it on, not even knowing that I would be a writer, just that I was doing what I had to do and that it was right. Days and nights of steel dust and furnaces and burned up mattress and tears in my beer listening to Hank Williams, and no woman for years like Bukowski at the beginning of Women. Still, I held on with nothing but his poems and some kind of crazy, stubborn will to go on. And I did go on. Bukowski, leading me through suicide, madness, bikers, women who threw me down into the hard asphalt of their rejection. Without my own poem, without my own voice, I had Bukowski, somehow leading me out of the darkness and toward the light, of finally finding my own voice and my own poetry, which I owe to him as much as maybe my life and much more. And so, you see that for me, a great, great light has gone out of this world. Yet I look over at my bookshelf, 30 Bukowski books wide, and realize that light can only really get brighter and brighter, and that I will have it always.
Yeah.
I don't drink like I used to, but this one's for everybody, and for Boo.
Oh, yeah.
And A while back, I worked 5 years in a machine shop on off of North Main, down there, near the cornfield where the LA River used to be. And it was pretty much a hellhole, but I learned a lot there, and I made money. It was all right. You know, it was kind of a sweatshop, but you know, it was a good job. And anyway, when I was down there, I used to think a lot about Bukowski and John Fante and downtown LA. You know, I drove by county jail every day, and it was inspirational. You know, and so anyway, I wrote this. There was like an old hotel I used to see out the door that I could imagine Bukowski might have been writing in. You know, back in the 50s or whatever. They had stories to tell. Off Alameda Street, working in the downtown LA factory, I feel the ghosts of Charles Bukowski, working the post office job, and John Fante, living in Bunker Hill, writing Ask the Dust, just a mile away. I feel the ghosts of all the hobos jumping out of boxcars onto switchyards thousands of miles from where they were born, of 19-year-old Mexican homeboys dead on street corners from bullets out of passing cars, and dead Chinamen who wore big straw hats. I feel the pounding of the machines and the filing of the loved ones past the open caskets of the men who ran them. The nightmares and the screams in Men's Central County Jail, and all the hours sweated out over oily, jerking turret lathes by men who wanted to make sure they never went there. I feel it in the 110-year-old red brick walls without windows, and all the men living on sidewalks because their women left them. All the 300 pounds of weightlifting muscle black men locking chains around fences to lots full of trucks. And all the drunks lined in dark bars trying to forget assembly lines and dreams they once had before the asphalt streets and concrete shop floors of this world knocked the dreaming out of them. All the men murdered by gangs or jobs or dead dreams. All the men waiting for a voice. And John Fante's son, Dan, is here. And that's an honor. Cheering. Another great writer. Okay, I've got this one. Isn't really about Bukowski too much. It's called Bukowski's Doorknob, but he makes an appearance, and it's kind of like, you know, he's in there. Bukowski's Doorknob. It would have been fun to make the mouthpiece for the trumpet Louis Armstrong Blue. Each shaving of brass falling to the concrete floor as my hands turned the wheels of the lathe, worth 10,000 Dixieland notes. I'd love to have made those aluminum braces FDR leaned on the moment he first rose from a wheelchair to walk to a microphone and make a speech after the polio felled him. How good to smell the stink of the steel chips I cut to make the doorknob. Charles Bukowski turned to step into a tiny New Orleans room and write Crucifix and a Death Hand. The wheel of the train taking Martin Luther King toward the podium to shout, I have a dream. The tip of the pen the long-lost son will lift to write the card finally forgiving his mother so their love can flow again. The stainless steel spout of the coffee machine pouring the good strong black coffee into the cup of the Skid Row wino, who will finally put down the bottle and find his way back into a machine shop to step up to a machine that can cut stinking steel, smoking and cutting oil down into the shape of a dream. I've got one more. I never knew Bukowski. I saw him read a couple times, and being in the room with him was electric and magical and a somewhat dangerous feeling. And I just lost my place. And Joan and I, my wife Joan, who just read, we live in Long Beach, across the harbor from San Pedro, where Bukowski lived in his house for 15 years or so before he died. And we drive over the bridge to go to San Pedro quite often, almost once a week sometimes, to get pizza. And we drive, on the way back, we always drive by Bukowski's house. And we never see him, of course, but it's fun to drive by his house. You know, it's almost like you think he's going to be, he'll walk by, but, you know. And Santa Cruz Street. So this is called Charles Bukowski's Groupie, and this is about Frank and Jane, which is a fictional couple I've made up that are quite a bit like myself and my wife Joan, and supposed to be funny. So Charles Bukowski's Groupie. After Frank and Jane have driven over the green Vincent Thomas Bridge from Long Beach to San Pedro to go to Amalfitano's Bakery for Frank's favorite chocolate walnut fudgies, Jane tells Frank to drive by Charles Bukowski's house. Driving down the hill with the port of LA Long Beach red cranes in sight, Frank knows the way by heart. Look! The trees have been pruned, and you can see the window of the room where Bukowski wrote, Jane says with delight. Jane has told Frank many times that Frank and Charles Bukowski are her favorite poets. And Frank looks for a few moments at the window where Charles Bukowski looked out at the green bridge and port's red cranes and wrote. Then Frank heads on down the street. Let's go around the block and look at it again. I want to feel Bukowski's spirit, Jane says. Frank lowers his brows and frowns. Why would I want to see it again, he says. Why would I want to be Charles Bukowski's groupie? Frank steps down harder on the accelerator. Jane once knew Charles Bukowski. In one of his letters, he asked her to come do a Greek dance with him in his new house on the hill. Just because Charles Bukowski has sold thousands of times more copies of his books than Frank has, and had several major motion pictures made of his work, doesn't mean Frank should drive around the block to look at his window again. Frank has his own window, where he writes and looks out at the next door apartment building's laundry room, and a red Ace Hardware trash can. And someday, after he's dead, he will be famous, and people will cruise down 2nd Street in Long Beach and point it out, after the gardeners have pruned back the fig tree in front of it. But, as Jane says, come on, Frank. At the last moment, Frank hits the brakes and jerks his arm and turns his Toyota right at the intersection and starts to drive around the block like he has dozens of times before. Why be small? He'll never be able to drive by his own window after he's dead, and a magnificent view of the 40-ton cranes in the largest port in the U.S. sure does beat an Ace Hardware trash can. Thank you very much.
Fred, thank you very much. Next up, we're going to have Dan Fante. There are so many connections Dan has to this place and to the topic of tonight. I will only simply say, here is Dan, and he'll take it from there.
See if we can lower this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aren't you the son of God? Son of a bitch.
My name's Dan, and
I'm just having some thoughts as Joan and Fred were reading about Hank and about how I got to know him. I got to know him through my dad. I guess I'm going to tell you this story. It's kind of an interesting Bukowski story. Hank had a friend and a drinking buddy who Richard knows about, a guy named Ben Pleasance. And, Ben was a poet and a playwright, and he was, back in the heyday of the LA Times, he was actually the poetry editor of the LA Times. Wow. And he was a drinking buddy of Charles Bukowski. And in the 60s, at some point, Hank and Ben were drunk and they were talking about writers, and Hank mentioned a guy named John Fante. And then on another occasion he mentioned a guy named, and finally Ben, who was, Hank wasn't a big reader, but Ben was a big reader, so Ben went to the library and he exhumed copies of my dad's books. And now my dad had spent the last 40 years writing hack screenplays, and was rather bitter, and but was still pretty close to a par golfer. You know, he'd smuggle himself out of the studio in the afternoon and go play golf, but Ben started knocking on his door and asking him about his books, and that led to a meeting with Hank, and Hank finally. Hank was afraid to write to my father. I'm not sure why, because he said my father was his god, and he was referring to Ask the Dust and some other books that my dad wrote. And but they finally got together, and Ben Pleasance began to write to people he knew, literary people, to try to exhume my father's books that had been out of print for 40 years. And through Ben and through Hank, Ask the Dust got published, republished, I think again in '76. And so I met, and my father would hang out with Bukowski. My dad was blind at the time and housebound, but Hank would come out to my dad's house in Malibu, and they'd sit and shoot the shit for a couple of hours, and that's how I met, I bumped into Hank, and it was a very cordial relationship between two sober writers. And Bukowski, one-on-one was quite a gentleman, and very well read, and loved the poets, and so he and my dad had a lot in common. Then I finally, really, at my dad's funeral, where Hank and Linda they came to attend his funeral, and I spoke to Hank and spoke to Linda, and so that was my relationship with him. But the truth is, without Ben Pleasance and Charles Bukowski, John Fante would be a long forgotten writer. So they're playing our song. So I've written a couple of books of poetry. I started out writing novels about 25 years ago, and I got sick of the characters living in my head for a year and a half, and so I was afraid to stop writing. So what I would do is I would write poetry, and reading Bukowski turned me on to writing poetry and reading Bukowski's poems. So I'm going to read a few of the poems that were inspired by Charles Bukowski. The first one I think I'm going to read is For My Father. Oh, this is from an unavailable copy of a gin-pissing raw meat dual carburetor V8 son of a bitch from Los Angeles. That's the name of the book.
Wow.
Stuck on my novel and wasting time. I drove up Beechwood Canyon in the hills today under the Hollywood sign. It felt again how it must have been 70 years ago for my old man and Nat West and Fenton and Bill Faulkner and that pack of overpaid, restless, and disenfranchised scream doctor movie hacks. Looking down through the soot, I said out loud, "You wanted this? A Spanish mansion on this fucking hill?" And hearing people whisper your name when you entered Musso's bar, and blowjobs from not-quite actresses after the card game, and too many drinks at the Garden of Allah. And then I remembered what you really left behind carelessly, unintentionally, in these greedy hills could never have been bought or sold. John Fante's gift to me was his pure writer's heart.
Yeah.
I wrote this 12 years ago. Now that I've written 10 years worth of books and plays and given up booze and cigarettes and filthy, glorious pornography, and my clothes don't stink from sleeping in my old Pontiac all night, and my hair is gone and I'm 20 pounds too fat and deep in my 60s with return calls to make and responsibilities, and the arguments I have with cops are no longer about bail or unpaid warrants or where I hid my gun. I now feel qualified to testify that time has changed nothing, that this thing that all my life within me has ticked and squirmed, this unfilled hole, this need to yell out and to change things and never be satisfied, this voice that has survived shrinks and jails and 3 divorces and suicide and bankruptcy and dozens of self-improvement weekends. This rage still guides my vision and demands that I go head first against my life like a fool in search of a pure white flame. A little poem for Venice Beach. I met the meanest bastard starving cat while sitting with a book on a bench smoking half a pack of Luckies at Venice Beach. He saw me and came up, white filthy with one green eye and one yellow eye and a fresh slash on his scarred ear. Angry as a wounded wolf, he kept his distance and his look said, "Feed me or fuck off. That bench you're on is my territory." What he didn't know is that I know desperate too, and crazy, and what emptiness and aloneness and rage can do to you when you've got nothing but pain in your pockets and your home is a busted out 1978 Pontiac stalled in an alley in West LA, and the voice in your mind is carving you up and killing you more of you off each day, and you wake up and drink more rat piss wine to keep you from instant madness, and God becomes a guy coming out of the 7-Eleven handing you chump change for another fucking jug, and fear is your finest feeling, and love is dead, and all time is dead, and even your eyes stink and your gut is bloating with the screaming voices of those you hate, and the only real sanity there is can be found in the small miracle of sucking back one more drink. That mean white cat didn't know that I've been cut too. The only difference between us is 25 years in my typewriter. Last poem. People send me emails, and so a guy named Mark sent me an email, and he asked me what it was like to be a writer. Here's my poem. Walk with only words and books as your friend. Dream the dreams of deviant dead writers, saints who coming before you drowned the pain of their purest heart in vats of gin like a flailing, unloved cat. Embrace selfishness and joblessness, smoke millions of unfiltered cigarettes, and glue your ass hopelessly to the evilest drunken crack whore who trade your balls in a New York instant for the guy at the end of the bar with a pitted face and a $50 bill. Do not be courageous. Remember that all men are fools and liars, soulless captives of their own blood-stained necessity, and forgive nothing. Then maybe one day like me, your feet aching and your skull still raw from last night's festivity, you'll kick over a box or turn a page and find yourself face to face with the blurry eyes of God. Thank you.
Dan, thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. Our next poet is we have one more after essay. Essay is let me introduce you again. Everyone, there's so many connections that the one point of contact I will mention about essay is you're responsible for the plaque in front of Baroque Books. Baroque Books, it's now Antebellum Gallery. Baroque Books was run by Red Bukowski, and it was really the place for first editions. And I will simply maybe let you just finish my sentence and then introduce yourself and get started.
Okay, cool. No, it's all right. I can do my own Griffin. Sam, who is writing something for the LA Times, asked me, why would you come out in public and read Bukowski? Here it is.
Yeah!
Here it is! This is why you read Charles Bukowski's poetry in public and his stories and everything else. Because you care, you're here. All right, thank you. No, Red was the University of Reds on Las Palmas. Long gone, unfortunately. Yeah, Red truly, and this is not Hollywood name-dropping bullshit. He was really one of my best friends. I was very lucky to know Red. He mentored me in the book. He mentored me in Bukowski. He just mentored me in life. Kid, you got enough money in your meter? Right? There are many, many bridges in this room. Take your minds off and run freely through the grass. Democracy. The problem, of course, isn't the democratic system. It's the living parts which make up the democratic system. The next person you pass on the street, multiply him or her by 3 or 4 or 30 or 40 million, and you will know immediately why things remain non-functional for most of us. I wish I had a cure for the chess pieces we call humanity. We've undergone any number of political cures, and we all remain foolish enough to hope that one on the way now will cure almost everything. Fellow citizens, the problem never was the democratic system. The problem is you.
Yes!
I saw a tramp last night, and this is for the dispossessed, the disenfranchised, the dissed by progress, and what we call the system and what we call the moment. Thank you. I saw a tramp, per request of Bill Roberts and Abel DeBretto. I saw a tramp last night. The way the old dog walked with dotted, tired fur down nobody's alley, being nobody's dog. Past the empty vodka bottles, past the peanut butter jars, with wires full of electricity, and the birds asleep somewhere. Down the alley he went, nobody's dog, moving through it all, brave as an army.
Yes.
This is prophecy, and it's still prophecy. This poem is mind-blowing every time I read it. I sound like Christopher Walken now. Not Charles Bukowski. Dinosauria we, and sing along if you like, please. Born like this, into this, as the chalk faces smile, as Mrs. Death laughs, as the elevators break, as political landscapes dissolve, as the supermarket bag boy holds a college degree, as the oily fish spit out their oily prey, as the sun is masks, we are born like this, into these carefully mad wars, into the sight of broken factory windows of emptiness, into bars where people no longer speak to each other, into fistfights that end in shootings and knifings, born into this, into hospitals which are so expensive that it's cheaper to die, into lawyers who charge so much it's cheaper to plead guilty, into a country where the jails are full and the madhouses closed, into a place where the masses elevate fools into rich heroes born into this.
Yes!
Just wait a minute! I'm getting a fucking drink. Hold on a second. I'm not done with this fucking poem. To Charles Bukowski, please. Fucking raise the goddamn class. What are you here for? To Charles fucking Bukowski. Thank you. Dying because of this, muted because of this, castrated, debauched, disinherited because of this, fooled by this, used by this, pissed on by this, made crazy and sick by this, made violent, made inhuman by this. The heart is blackened, the fingers reach for the throat, the gun, the knife, the bomb. The fingers reach toward an unresponsive God. The fingers reach for the bottle, the pill, the powder. We are born into this sorrowful deadliness. We are born into a government 60 years in debt that soon will be unable to even pay the interest on that debt. And the banks will burn. Money will be useless. There will be open and unpunished murder in the streets. It will be guns and roving mobs. Land will be useless. Food will become a diminishing return. Nuclear power will be taken over by the many. Explosions will continually shake the earth. Radiated robot men will stalk each other. The rich and the chosen will watch from space platforms. Dante's Inferno will be made to look like a children's playground. The sun will not be seen, and it will always be night. Trees will die. All vegetation will die. Radiated men will eat the flesh of radiated men. The sea will be poisoned. The lakes and rivers will vanish. Rain will be the new gold, California. The rotting bodies of men and animals will stink in the dark wind. The last few survivors will be overtaken by new and hideous diseases, and the space platforms will be destroyed by attrition, the petering out of supplies, the natural effect of general decay. And there will be the most beautiful silence never heard, born out of that. The sun, still hidden there, awaiting the next chapter. I'm going to read two more, and that will be it. The history of a tough motherfucker. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. The history of a tough motherfucker. Thank him. He came to the door one night, wet, thin, beaten, and terrorized. A white, cross-eyed, tailless cat. I took him in and fed him, and he stayed. Grew to trust me until a friend drove up the driveway and ran him over. I took what was left to a vet who said, not much chance, give him these pills. His backbone is crushed, but it was crushed before and somehow mended. If he lives, he'll never walk. Look at these x-rays, he's been shot. Look here, the pellet is still there. Also, he once had a tail. Somebody cut it off. I took the cat back. It was a hot summer, one of the hottest in decades. I put him on the bathroom floor, gave him water and pills. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't touch the water. I dipped my finger into it and wet his mouth, and I talked to him. I didn't go anywhere. I put in a lot of bathroom time and talked to him and gently touched him. And he looked back at me with those pale blue crossed eyes. And as the days went by, he made his first move, dragging himself forward by his front legs. The rear ones wouldn't work. He made it to the litter box, crawled over and in. It was like a trumpet of possible victory, blowing in that bathroom and into the city. I related to that cat. I'd had it bad, not that bad, but bad enough. One morning he got up, stood up, fell back down, and just looked at me. You can make it, I told him. He kept trying, getting up and falling down. Finally, he walked a few steps. He was like a drunk. The rear legs just didn't want to do it, and he fell again, rested, then got up. You know the rest. Now he's better than ever, cross-eyed, almost toothless, but the grace is back, and that look in his eyes never left. And now sometimes I'm interviewed. They want to hear about life and literature, and I get drunk and hold up my cross-eyed, shot, run-over, detailed cat, and I say, look at this. But they don't understand. They say something like, you say you've been influenced by Celine? No, I hold the cat up by what happens, by things like this, by this, by this. I shake the cat, hold him up in the smoky and drunken light. He's relaxed, he knows. It's then that the interviews end. Although I am proud sometimes when I see the pictures later, and there I am, and there is the cat. We are photographed together. He too knows it's bullshit, but that somehow it all helps. Actually, hold on a second here. Fuck it. Well, I left one at home, really important one too, the best life in the big city. All right. This is it. Because the one I wanted to read, and some of you might know it, is Laughing Heart. And it comes at the end of his life. And those people who think that he's just a drunk motherfucking womanizer and brawler are morons. He's a fucking writer. He wrote about his life, the life, and he took the ordinary, brought it to the extraordinary, and made you guys read a fucking book. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Like Aaron Copland was, Bukowski was the fanfare for the common man. So this is it. To the whore who took my poems. Again, sing along. Okay. To the whore who took my poems. Some say we should keep personal remorse from the poem. Stay abstract. And there is some reason to this, but Jesus. 12 poems gone? And I don't keep carbons. And you have my paintings too. My best ones. It's stifling. Are you trying to crush me out like the rest of them? Why didn't you take my money? They usually do, from the sleeping drunk and pants sick in the corner. Next time, take my left arm or 50, but not my poems. I'm not Shakespeare, but sometimes simply there won't be any more, abstract or otherwise. There'll always be money and whores and drunkards down to the last bomb. But, as God said, crossing his legs, I see where I have made plenty of poets, but not so very much poetry. Thank you. I am honored to be here with all of you. Thank you very much.
Essay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're going to bring this on home, and no one better to do that than Suzanne Lummis. Let me attempt to properly introduce you. Suzanne, you just received the Blue Lynx Poetry Prize.
L-Y-N-X.
Yes, as in the cat. Your new book of poetry, Open 24 Hours, will come out this fall 2014. We're very excited. And just to give her her proper credentials, you did write the Los Angeles Review of Books obituary memorial for Charles Bukowski back in '94. So please take it away and bring us home. Take us by the hand.
So I have all these books. What will happen if I put these books right here? Will
Perfect. No, nothing. No, nothing will blow up.
So
I can take your bag.
Could you do that for me? I will repay you in multiple ways if you would do that.
I'm going to show you later.
Okay. So of course I'm gonna read all these books cover to cover. No, I'm just trying to scare you. Thank you, King Eddy's Bar. And the spirit of Bukowski. thank you, patrons of King Eddy's Bar. Did you all get a good drink tonight? Yes. Let's thank the bartenders. Especially I want to thank that very sensitive bartender who made my lemon drop for me. I offended him. He's very sensitive, don't offend him. I tried to use a hand signal to get him over to me. He was very offended because he felt that was rude. So don't use hand signals. There's, you know, they really are the most sensitive bartenders in town. We talked about it. Everybody knows.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, I will wrap it. It was a really good drink. It hit me really hard. I've been over there in the corner trying to sober up. I got my money's worth, I'll tell you. And especially thank you, LAVA, Los Angeles Visionaries Association. Wouldn't we all love to have a business card that says Los Angeles Visionary Association? How cool is that? Now, I'm going to read the first poem of Bukowski's I ever remember, or at least the first one that ever struck me. I was living in a tenement on Vermont Avenue and Lexington. It wasn't a tenement. Oh, you know Vermont Avenue and Lexington, just below some... Really? Yeah. There should be a plaque on it saying Suzanne Lummis, poet, LA poet, used to live here, but there is not. They can't afford that or anything else. And it wasn't a tenement when I moved into it. It was fine when I moved into it. Then it went downhill. I think when I moved into it, I brought the property rates down. They couldn't get any, you know, they had to lower their rent or something. So the whole place, the whole neighborhood went to hell when I moved in. And I had studied in a very fine creative writing program with Philip Levine, the famous, oh yeah, I hear a yeah, I hear a yeah, okay, good. Philip Levine, one of the great living poets, but in that writing program, in Fresno, of all places, who knew Fresno, we were introduced to poets like Galway Connell, W.S. Merwin, Hayden Carruth, James Wright, very good poets, but they weren't like Bukowski. They were nothing like Bukowski. I really didn't know about Bukowski until I moved to L.A. I'd heard of him as a sort of distant figure who was somebody in L.A. And then I read this poem in my tenement, and it is to this day become one of the most important poets in my life. Yeah. It says it for me. The tragedy of the leaves. I awakened to dryness and the ferns were dead. The potted plants yellow as corn. My woman was gone, and the empty bottles like bled corpses surrounded me with their uselessness. The sun was still good, though, and my landlady's note cracked and fine in undemanding yellowness. What was needed now was a good comedian, ancient style, a jester with jokes upon absurd pain. Ah, pain is absurd because it exists. Nothing more. I shaved carefully with an old razor the man who had once been young and said to have genius. But that's the tragedy of the leaves, the dead ferns, the dead plants, and I walked into a dark hall where the landlady stood, execrating and final, sending me to hell, waving her fat, sweaty arms and screaming, screaming for rent, because the world had failed us both. Spoke to me. Still kind of does, unfortunately. Yeah. All right. Not everybody recognizes the humor in Bukowski. He could be so funny. And, you know, it's interesting what Joan said about the feminists and their position. And I get the feminist point of view. I was a feminist. And I see what their problem is. But you know what, poets, you get this, Joan. poets have to see everybody's point of view. And I also see Bukowski's point of view, too. And I'm fascinated by the very few poems that are around that tell about friendship between men. You think about it, there are very few contemporary poems that really describe, that honor friendship between men. And this is one that I helped to publish in a book that I was the primary editor of, Grand Passion, The Poets of Los Angeles and Beyond. I just love this poem by Bukowski, and it's written to his great friend, the late poet John Thomas. Beef tongue. I hadn't eaten for a couple of days and was up at this poet's place where a woman took care of him. He was a big bearded ox with a brain twice as large as the world, and we'd been up all night listening to tapes, talking, smoking, swallowing pills. His woman had gone to bed hours ago. It was 10 a.m. and the sunlight came in, not knowing that we hadn't slept. And the next thing, I looked up and he was coming out of the kitchen saying, "Hey, Bukowski, look!" I couldn't see it clearly. At first it looked like a pale yellow boot filled with water. Then it looked like a fish without a head. Then it looked like an elephant's cock. And then he brought it closer. Beef tongue! Beef tongue! He held it out arm's length from his shoulder right before my face. Beef tongue! Beef tongue! And it was! And I never imagined any steer with a tongue that fat and long. It was a rape of the brain. They had gone deep into the throat and hacked it out, and there it was now, beef tongue. And it was yellow and pink and blue and orange, and it was choking, it was gagging all by itself. Just another reasonable and sensible atrocity that intelligent men get used to. I was not an intelligent man. I made it to the sink and began heaving. Stupid, of course, stupid. It was only dead meat. No feeling now. The pain long since run out of the bottom of the world. But I continued to vomit. Finished. Cleaned the sink and walked back in. "Sorry," I said. "It's okay," he said. "I forgot about your stomach." Then he walked the tongue into the kitchen and came out, and we talked of this and that. And in about 10 minutes, I heard the water boiling, and I smelled that tongue cooking. It was whirling in that bubbling water without mouth or eye or name. It was this huge tongue going around and around under that lid and stinking, becoming cooked tongue, becoming a most delicious and flavored meat for the gut. But since he was a fine fellow, I asked him to turn it off. I was leaving. It was a cold morning, and I shivered in the doorway, but the new air was good, and I could feel the legs and the heart and the lungs beginning to envision a chance of continuance. We talked about a book of poems he was helping me gather, and I said, "Goodbye, phone. Goodbye, phone. Keep in touch." And then we didn't shake hands, a thing neither of us liked to do, a lousy, paper-thin custom. And I went up the path and out to my car and started the thing, and as it warmed up, I sensed him moving into the kitchen behind that 2-foot square mass of black beard. Those blue diamond eyes shining out there above that black, those intelligent, happy blue diamond eyes, knowing everything almost, and he turning on the flame again, the water beginning to shift and
simmer, the tongue moving down in there. Quote, I have this tremendous IQ. It's all that keeps me going, unquote. Quote, if I can't be happy, I'm not any good, unquote. And I stupid in my machine, turned it out from the curbing, let it roll through those yellow mornings, down those curves, those dips, and that green along there. Well, we'd gotten by the handshake, and thank Christ he hadn't invited me for dinner. When I got home, I thumbed through some Renoir, Pizarro, and Diaz prints. Then I ate a hard-boiled egg. Second to last little piece here. Who is it? I'm curious. I think if you really want to know, want to get to the soul and spirit, or discover something about the soul and spirit of a writer, find out who they loved, find out who their influences are, find out who they honor. Who here knows Bukowski's favorite poet? Fante was his favorite fiction writer.
Jeffers, I believe.
You got it. Who said that? Essay? Essay? Okay.
What do I win, Suzanne? A kiss? Give me my fucking kiss.
Okay.
This is the first! Yeah!
We got that for the record.
Thank you.
All right. That's the real deal.
Yeah,
All right. Okay, that's what he wins. That's what I win for knowing Bukowski's. Now all kinds of people are going to say they know Bukowski's favorite, and they're going to want to kiss either you. They're going to want to kiss either you or me, depending on their proclivities, right? Okay. Yeah, Robertson Jeffers. That's interesting. Isn't that interesting? Because when you think about, I mean, Robertson Jeffers, the great California poet, arguably, maybe, or probably the greatest poet to be identified with California, who lived out, who separated himself from the rest of the world, society, built his house out there, Tor House in Big Sur, overlooking the ocean, and was quite a misanthrope, really. I mean, he was disgusted with humanity, disgusted with people after World War II, wanted no part of people anymore. And at first, when I really discovered that, I went, isn't that interesting? But then I thought, oh, it makes sense. I'm going to read Ron Robertson Jeffers, and what I think the connection is the passion, the intensity, the darkness, the skeptical view of humanity. All right, here it is, Hooded Night, and from the poet who looked at the hawks, looked at the ocean, his tower. He built a tower in his Tor House, as he called it, that simply overlooked the waves, and that's what he wanted to see, the wilderness. Hooded night. At night toward dawn, all the lights of the shore have died, and a wind moves in the dark, the sleeping power of the ocean, no more beast-like than man-like, not to be compared, itself and itself. Its breath blown shoreward huddles the world with a fog. No stars dance in heaven. No ship light glances. I see the heavy granite bodies of the rocks of the headland that were ancient here before Egypt had pyramids. Bulk on the gray of the sky, and beyond them the jets of young trees I planted the year of the Versailles Peace. But here is the final, unridiculous piece.
Before the first man, here were the stones, the ocean, the cypresses, and the pallid region, and the stone-rough dome of fog where the moon falls on the west. Here is reality. The other is a spectral episode. After the inquisitive animals' amusements are quiet, the dark glory. Piece, my very last piece, it's just a little letter from Bukowski. When I set out to write the piece for the LA Times Book Review, I really immersed myself in his letters, because there's a lot of aspects of himself he concealed in his poetry, or where he chose not to speak out of that part of himself. And in his prose, in his letters, you find out how literate this man was, and what a damn good writer he was, how much he knew, and also how generous and how grateful he was. And there's a tender part of himself that only occasionally comes across in his poetry. He's writing to some of his first publishers. Essay might know this too. John and Louise Webb. Yeah, they published his first books, and to see if anybody here, if anybody here doesn't like the printed word on paper or books, this is your chance to slip out now.
Really? Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, you can slip out, because this is a praise of the printed word and the book. Like And it's November, it was written to John and Louise Webb, November 21st, 1963, and he calls it The Day. I came back from the store and there was a package against the door. Don't open till Christmas. But to hell with that. I have been waiting. And I tore the paper off, saw the miracle jacket, cover, skeleton in sand, the works, peeling back the pages. I ate the whole insides, read the poems I've forgotten, the good Corrington back page wherein you describe paper, type, etc., the humor, agony, bug, rat, breakdown, struggle, which goes so well along with the author. And to say you've come through is nothing, that you've come through in this way, page by page, inch by inch, breakdown by breakdown, cut fingers, landladies, the street corner, the hours. My God, if the poems have been wasted, the book has not been wasted. Little calm and precious beauties and loves of doing, like a garden of good, like mountains, like everything that counts. By God, you've done it. You've done it. And I'm proud and struck and awed that you have, the both of you, caught me up in it. This is the kind of book that grows on you in days, not minutes. This is the kind of book you remember like you remember war or birth or love or fire, the singing and my darkest dark, the photo, a buck with cigarette, everything, everything. There is no beginning. It is impossibly, impossibly true. Then I go elsewhere. It's like walking through a forest with wine at high noon, and everything gone except the soaring. My God, you've done it. You've done it. Never such a book. Where? In all the libraries, in all the cities. I have never seen such a book put together in such a way. Inventive, creativeness, and love. Where have the publishers been for centuries? You've done it. You've done it. The book will sit and grow on me. They will enter me. It is a part, a beholden and miraculous part. It does little more it does little to say more. The whole thing wells and turns in me almost impossibly. My thanks for all the love and the honor and the pain and the beauty, the pain yours, the others you've passed to me. Going now, going.
Yes.
Well, I think at this point there's nowhere left to go but up to the bar and everyone order a drink. And we'll check back in. It's going to take a little while for Ryan and his crew. In about 15 minutes, I guess we'll check back in and everyone will raise a drink to Bukowski in about 15 minutes, maybe 20. All right. I want to thank Johnny for making this happen. I would like to thank each of the poets. I would like to thank Joan. Thank you. Fred, thank you. Dan, thank you. God bless you. God bless your father. Essay, thank you. And Suzanne, thank you. Thank you for bringing us home. So, everyone, get around and we'll check back in. Let's get the music back on. We'll check back in about 15 minutes and raise a drink to Charles Bukowski. Thank you.
No, it was great, man. It's so fun to have all you guys down here. Thank you. It was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much, Dave. Ryan, we're ready to go. Essay? Don't worry. Don't worry. I believe it is time for Essay to lead us in a toast.
Oh, I didn't know that. My friends, drinks for all my friends. All right, on the count of 3, we're all going to toast to Charles Bukowski, and all we're going to say is whatever the hell you want. 1, 2, 3. Charles Bukowski! And one more. King Eddy! And Richard. Richard! That's great.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you,
Bunker! Eddie Bunker! There's Mr. California, man. We got it in. Eddie Bunker! Yeah! Thank you. That's right.
Everyone, thank you so much. We'll see you around. Everyone, have a great rest of your weekend. And Godspeed. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, we did it. We did it.
You're so great. At least I made the toast. Jeez.
Thank you for making it.
How was it?
Fantastic.
Did you guys go downstairs?
No, too complicated.
But this room was packed and everyone was quiet and listening. It was beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think we had 200 people. And everyone